The message glared up at me from my phone screen, each word like a slap across my face. "I want a divorce, Amanda. Don't bother calling. My mind is made up. 7 years with someone who contributes nothing has been 7 years too many. You've become worthless to me. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow." My fingers hovered over the screen, trembling slightly. Not from heartbreak or fear, but from a strange mixture of relief and simmering anger. Michael had finally said out loud what his actions had been screaming for years. Worthless. I set my phone down on our marble kitchen counter and looked around the Boston penthouse that Michael believed he had provided for us. The floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the harbor, boats bobbing like toys in the distance. The evening light caught on the crystal glasses I'd just finished arranging. Michael liked entertaining clients with top-shelf whiskey and practiced charm. He expected tears, panic, desperate pleas. Instead, I walked calmly to my home office, unlocked the hidden drawer in my antique desk, and pulled out a sleek black portfolio. Inside were account numbers, investment statements, and banking information from the Cayman Islands, Zurich, and Singapore that would have made Michael's eyes widen in disbelief if he had ever bothered to ask what I did during those shopping trips abroad. The truth? I hadn't been worthless for a very long time, and Michael was about to discover just how expensive underestimating me would be. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I met Michael Donovan on a rainy April evening at a charity gala in downtown Boston. I was 28, recently returned from 5 years working in international finance in Hong Kong, and building my client portfolio at a boutique investment firm that specialized in offshore wealth management. He was 34, recently made partner at Preston and Hughes Law, specializing in corporate mergers and acquisitions. Tall, with the kind of confidence that filled a room before he even spoke, Michael had perfected the art of making everyone feel like they'd just met the most important person in Boston. "Amanda Chen," he said, taking my hand longer than necessary. "I've been watching you talk to old Sanders over there. I think you're the only person who's made him laugh in a decade." I smiled, extracting my hand smoothly. "Mr. Sanders and I understand each other. He appreciates directness in his investments and his conversations." "His investments?" Michael raised an eyebrow, reassessing me. "You're his financial advisor? I thought you might be his granddaughter or something." It wasn't the first time someone had underestimated me. A young Asian American woman in the overwhelmingly white male world of wealth management. Usually, I corrected them politely and moved on. But something about Michael's quick recalibration intrigued me. "I manage about 30% of his portfolio," I said. "The international portion, the part that's grown 42% in the last 18 months. Michael's smile widened. "Impressive. I've been trying to get old Sanders as a client for 2 years. Perhaps you were using the wrong approach." "Apparently." His eyes lingered on me with new interest. "Can I get you another drink?" I should have recognized it then. How quickly he moved from dismissal to attraction once he realized I might be useful. But the chemistry between us was immediate and intense. By our third date, when he took me sailing on his family's boat, I was already imagining a partnership of equals, 2 ambitious professionals supporting each other's rise. How utterly, embarrassingly wrong I was. The first year of marriage was everything I'd hoped. We bought the penthouse together, combining our finances in what I believed was a show of trust. Michael introduced me to Boston's elite social circles, and I helped him understand the nuances of international finance that many of his clients needed. "My brilliant wife," he'd say at dinner parties, his arm around my waist. "She makes money appear in places the IRS doesn't even know exist." I'd laugh along, though the joke always made me uncomfortable. My work was entirely legal, complex, and confidential, yes, but legitimate tax strategy for international clients. not evasion. The shift began in our second year of marriage, so subtle I barely noticed at first. Michael started scheduling dinners with clients on evenings when I had my own business events. "It's just easier if I handle Preston on my own," he'd say. You know how old-fashioned he is about women in finance. Then came the comments about my travel schedule. "Another trip to Singapore? Didn't you just go last month? The house feels empty without you." The guilt worked. I started declining client meetings abroad, joining video calls at 3 a.m. instead to accommodate time differences. My biggest client, the Wong family office with its $2 billion portfolio, began hinting they might need someone more available. "I think it's for the best," Michael said when I told him about potentially losing the account. "You've been working too hard anyway. We don't need the money. I made partner, remember?" That night, lying awake beside his sleeping form, I made a decision. I would not lose the Wong account, and I would not tell Michael about the new structure I was creating for my business. The next day, I called Ms. Wong directly. "I'm restructuring my client services," I told her. "I'm establishing my own independent consultancy, more flexibility, more personalized attention, and complete confidentiality." "Your husband's firm doesn't mind?" she asked, always perceptive. "My business is my business," I replied, "and your money deserves my full attention." Ms. Wong didn't just stay, she referred 3 other family offices to me within months. I registered my new company, Meridian Global Advisors, in Singapore, where most of my clients were based. I maintained my role at the Boston firm for appearances sec, but gradually transferred my major clients to my own business. Michael never asked about the transition. He was too busy with his own career ascent to notice that mine had taken a different direction. When I mentioned setting up a home office in our spare bedroom, he waved dismissively. "Whatever makes you happy, honey. But don't you think it's time we thought about using that room for a nursery instead?" The question hung between us, loaded, with expectations I wasn't ready to fulfill. Children had always been a someday discussion for us, not an immediate plan. My new business was barely a year old, growing rapidly but still demanding my full attention. "I thought we agreed to wait until we were both established in our careers," I said carefully. Michael's laugh held an edge I hadn't heard before. "I'm a partner now, Amanda. I'm established, and you've cut back your hours at the firm already. What are you waiting for?" "I haven't cut back," I clarified. "I've restructured. My client load is actually larger now." He looked genuinely surprised. "Really? I thought you were winding down. Isn't that why you're home more often?" The conversation revealed a gulf between us I hadn't fully acknowledged. Michael had constructed a narrative where my career was naturally becoming secondary to his, where my ambitions were a temporary phase before settling into supportive wifehood and motherhood. It wasn't malicious. That was almost worse. He simply couldn't conceive of my work as equally important, equally demanding of respect and space. In his mind, he was being progressive by allowing me to work at all. Rather than confront this directly, I made another decision. I opened my first offshore account the following week, a legitimate business account in Singapore for my growing client base, but separate from our joint finances. When my first major commission came through from the Wong family, a sum larger than my annual salary at the Boston firm, I deposited it there rather than in our shared account. Over the next 5 years, as Michael's dismissal of my career grew more pronounced, my separate financial life expanded. I added accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands, all properly reported on my personal taxes but never discussed with my increasingly distant husband. "I don't know how you entertain yourself all day in that little office," he remarked once, glancing at my closed door as he loosened his tie after work. "Don't you get bored?" I smiled, thinking of the conference call I'd just concluded with clients from 3 continents, the $50 million portfolio restructuring I'd orchestrated that morning. "I managed to stay busy," I replied. By our 6th anniversary, we were living parallel lives. Michael worked increasingly late hours, often not returning until I was already asleep. I woke at dawn for calls with Asian markets, managing my growing client list with ruthless efficiency. We performed affection at his firm's functions, where I was introduced simply as Michael's wife, despite now managing over $300 million in assets. The cracks became impossible to ignore when I discovered the affair. It wasn't dramatic. No lipstick on collars or suspicious phone calls. Just an email that popped up on our shared iPad. A hotel confirmation for a weekend I knew Michael was supposed to be at a conference in Chicago. The reservation was for 2, and the second guest's name was listed: Jessica Palmer, an associate at his firm. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I accelerated plans I'd been considering for months. I consulted discreetly with a divorce attorney, ensuring my business structure would protect my separate assets. I documented every dismissive comment about my career, every time he'd taken credit for our lifestyle while diminishing my contributions. When Michael began suggesting I give up my office, we could use the space for a proper home gym, I knew our marriage was already over in every way that mattered. We were just going through the motions, 2 strangers sharing expensive real estate and occasionally occupying the same bed. His text message asking for divorce came after a particularly tense dinner where I declined again to discuss starting a family before it's too late. At 35, apparently, I was on the verge of permanent barrenness in Michael's view. I didn't tell him I had discovered his affair. There was no point. The marriage had failed for reasons far more fundamental than infidelity. It had failed because Michael had never seen. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Seen me, not truly. He had seen an accessory, a supporting character in the Michael Donovan success story. Standing in my office after receiving his text, I felt an odd sense of calm as I reviewed my offshore statements. Over the past 5 years, I had amassed personal wealth that nearly matched Michael's, all separately held, all properly documented as my premarital business and independent income. Our prenuptial agreement, which Michael had insisted upon, to protect his family assets, would now work largely in my favor. It clearly stated that business interests established before or during the marriage remained separate property. Meridian Global Advisors was mine alone. The accounts in Singapore, Switzerland, and the Cayman Islands were mine alone. And Michael, who believed he was cutting loose a worthless dependent, was about to discover just how expensive underestimation could be. I poured myself a glass of the 30-year-old Macallan, the bottle Michael saved for special clients, and raised it to my reflection in the window. To freedom, I whispered, and to consequences. 3 days passed before Michael returned to the penthouse. I heard his key in the lock late on a Friday evening. I was sitting at the kitchen island, laptop open, reviewing client portfolios with a glass of wine beside me. He paused in the doorway, clearly expecting something different. Perhaps tear-swollen eyes or moving boxes. Instead, he found me working calmly, dressed in silk loungewear, hair pulled back in a neat chignon. "Amanda," he said, his tone careful. "I thought you might have gone to your sister's." I looked up, taking in his appearance, the perfectly tailored suit that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in his posture, the carefully constructed facade of control. Why would I do that? This is my home, too. Michael set his briefcase down, loosening his tie with practiced ease. I assumed you'd want some space after. The message. My lawyer says he sent over the initial paperwork today. He did, I confirmed. I've forwarded everything to my attorney. Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, that I had already retained counsel. Good. That should make this straightforward. I'm prepared to be generous, Amanda. The prenup entitles you to— I'm familiar with what the prenup entitles me to, I interrupted, closing my laptop. I helped draft it, if you recall. Right. He poured himself a whiskey, not offering me one. I'd like to handle this amicably. There's no need for things to get adversarial. Adversarial, I repeated, tasting the word. Like calling your spouse worthless via text message? Michael had the grace to look slightly abashed. I was angry. The timing was poor. The timing or the marriage? He ignored the barb, taking a long sip of his drink. My offer is fair, Amanda. You'll get a lump sum that should help you restart your life. The penthouse will go on the market, and we'll split the proceeds after the mortgage is paid. I smiled, the expression not reaching my eyes. There is no mortgage, Michael. He blinked. Of course there is. We refinanced last year. No, you tried to refinance last year. I declined to co-sign because the terms were poor. Instead, I paid off our existing mortgage. I took a deliberate sip of wine. Outright. Michael stared at me, whiskey forgotten in his hand. That's not possible. The payoff amount was over $2 million. $2,342,018 to be exact, I confirmed. The transaction cleared on December 21st. Merry Christmas to us. With what money? His voice had risen slightly, control slipping. Our joint account never had that kind of cash. I would have noticed. Not our joint account, my business account. Your little consulting side hustle? He scoffed, recovering his composure. Now who's being unrealistic? You advise a few expatriates on their 401ks. That doesn't generate millions. I stood, walking to my office with Michael following, confusion evident on his face. From my desk, I retrieved the deed to the penthouse, now solely in my name following the mortgage payoff, and handed it to him. My little consulting side hustle, as you call it, manages just over $400 million in assets across 3 continents. I kept my voice even, professional. Meridian Global Advisors, my company, cleared $11 million in fees and commissions last year alone. Michael stared at the deed, then at me, his expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and the first hints of alarm. That's not possible, he repeated, but with less conviction. I would have known. Would you? When did you last ask me about my work, Michael? When did you last express interest in anything beyond whether I'd be home to host your client dinners? He set the deed down carefully, attorney's instincts finally kicking in. If what you're saying is true, and that's a significant if, why keep it secret from your husband? It wasn't a secret. It simply wasn't discussed. I leaned against my desk. You assumed I was playing at having a career while waiting to fulfill my real purpose as your wife and potential mother to your children. Correcting you became exhausting. So instead, you built some kind of shadow financial life? His tone had shifted to something harder. While living off my income? I laughed then, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Michael, I haven't lived off your income since our 2nd anniversary. I've paid half of all household expenses from my separate accounts, plus the occasional luxury you believed you were providing, like our trip to Bali last spring or the box seats at the symphony you enjoy showing off to clients. His face flushed. You're lying. This is some kind of manipulation. To what end? I interrupted. You asked for this divorce, not me. I'm simply clarifying our financial reality before your lawyer embarks on a settlement proposal based on false assumptions. Michael's legal training was visibly battling with his wounded ego. Finally, he straightened, adjusting his cuffs in a gesture I recognized as his courtroom preparation. If what you're claiming is accurate, documentation will verify it. I'll have my team conduct a complete forensic accounting. Feel free, I replied evenly. My attorney will provide everything necessary to establish the legitimate, separate nature of my assets. In the meantime, I've prepared the guest room for you until other arrangements can be made. The guest room? This is my home? This is our home, I corrected. Owned outright, now solely in my name as per the deed you're holding, in a building with a strict no subletting policy that I confirmed with the management office yesterday. You're welcome to stay in the guest room as a courtesy until you find appropriate accommodations. Michael stared at me as if seeing a stranger. In many ways, he was. The woman he believed he had married, deferential, dependent, defined by his success, had never really existed. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. I considered the question, head tilted slightly. "I'm exactly who I've always been, Michael. You just never bothered to look." That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. The weight of pretense finally lifted. In the morning, I woke to an empty apartment. Michael had left early, no doubt to consult with his attorney about this unexpected development. I made myself a leisurely espresso and settled at my desk for morning calls with Hong Kong. Life continued. My life, on my terms, with the freedom that comes from being seen clearly at last, even if I had to be the one to do the seeing. Michael's lawyer called mine that afternoon, requesting an emergency meeting to clarify the financial landscape before proceeding. I smiled at my attorney's email relaying the request. The landscape was about to become crystal clear. The emergency meeting was scheduled for the following morning at my attorney Diane Lowell's office. Neutral territory, though I suspected Michael had pushed for it, hoping I'd feel intimidated by the sudden urgency. I arrived 15 minutes. Early, dressed in a charcoal gray Armani suit that projected exactly the image I needed. Confident, composed, and completely in control. Diane greeted me with a firm handshake and knowing smile. She was in her 50s, with a reputation for handling high-profile divorces with surgical precision. "Amanda, you look ready for battle." "Not battle," I corrected. "Just clarity." She nodded approvingly. "The best strategy. I've reviewed everything you sent over. Your documentation is impeccable." I learned early in international finance, records matter more than recollections. Diane's assistant showed us into the conference room where Michael and his attorney, Harrison Wells, were already waiting. Harrison was a senior partner at a prestigious Boston firm, known for representing the city's elite in their various legal entanglements. His presence alone suggested Michael was taking this situation very seriously. Ms. Chen, Ms. Lowell, Harrison greeted us with practiced cordiality. "Thank you for accommodating this meeting on such short notice." Michael said nothing, his expression carefully neutral, though his eyes tracked my movements as I took my seat across from him. The conference table between us felt like an appropriate metaphor. "Let's get straight to the point," Harrison continued once we were settled. "My client has expressed concern about potential undisclosed assets that may impact our divorce proceedings." Diane smiled. "All assets have been properly disclosed in the financial affidavit my client submitted yesterday. If you have specific questions, we're happy to address them." Harrison cleared his throat. "According to Mr. Donovan, Ms. Chen has recently claimed ownership of a business entity, Meridian Global Advisors, that was never mentioned during their marriage, along with multiple offshore accounts containing substantial assets." "Not mentioned?" I interjected, ignoring Diane's subtle warning glance. "That's incorrect. Meridian Global Advisors is registered in my name, properly reported on my personal taxes, and referenced in our prenuptial agreement under Article 4, which states, and I quote, "Any business interests owned by either party before marriage or established during the marriage shall remain the separate property of that party." Michael's jaw tightened visibly. He clearly hadn't revisited the prenup before making accusations. "Perhaps I should clarify," Harrison attempted. "Mr. Donovan was unaware of the extent of this business." "My client's awareness or lack thereof doesn't change the legal reality," Diane replied smoothly. "The prenuptial agreement is clear, as is Massachusetts law regarding separate property." Harrison pulled out a document from his portfolio. have concerns about the timing and nature of these offshore accounts. If marital funds were used to establish— They weren't, I interrupted again. Every account was established with my separate earnings, properly documented through wire transfers from my business accounts. The initial funding for Meridian came from clients I brought with me from Hong Kong before I even met Michael. Michael finally spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. You never mentioned millions in offshore accounts, Amanda. Not once in 7 years of marriage. I met his gaze steadily. You never asked. When I tried to discuss my business structure, you dismissed it as my hobby. When I mentioned international clients, you changed the subject to your own work. When I suggested adding you to my family office client list, you laughed and said you handled the real money in our relationship. His face flushed slightly at having his words quoted back to him. Furthermore, I continued, these aren't hidden assets. They're properly reported to the IRS. The fact that you assumed I was financially dependent doesn't make it true. Harrison attempted to regain control of the conversation. Regardless of how these accounts were established, as marital partners, there is presumably some commingling of assets that would— There is no commingling, Diane interjected, pushing a thick folder across the table. My client has maintained meticulous records. Page 3 shows the original capital for Meridian Global coming exclusively from Ms. Chen's premarital accounts. Pages 4 through 17 document every major deposit and the clear business source of those funds. She turned to a tabbed section. Pages 18 through 22 show Ms. Chen's contributions to household expenses paid from her separate accounts, demonstrating that not only was she not living off Mr. Donovan's income, but she was contributing substantially to their lifestyle. I watched Michael as he flipped through the documents, his expression growing more troubled with each page. The narrative he had constructed about our marriage was unraveling in real time. The convenient fiction of the supportive wife whose career was just a placeholder until motherhood. If anything, Diane continued, these records suggest Ms. Chen has been overly generous in her contributions to joint expenses, considering her separate property status. Harrison leaned over to whisper something to Michael, who shook his head sharply in response. There's also the matter of the penthouse, Harrison said, recovering his professional demeanor. Mr. Donovan contests the claim that Ms. Chen paid off the mortgage unilaterally and had the deed transferred solely to her name. Diane smiled. The documentation is on page 24. A wire transfer from Ms. Chen's Cayman business account to Boston First National Bank on December 21st, with the mortgage satisfaction letter and updated deed filing dated December 28th. Michael's face had gone from flushed to pale. This can't be right. We've been living in separate financial worlds while sharing a bed? Who does that? I felt a flash of genuine emotion break through my composed exterior. Someone whose ambitions were consistently diminished. Someone whose expertise was only valued when it directly benefited her husband's career. Someone who grew tired of being patted on the head and told her work was cute, while being expected to drop everything for dinner parties with your clients. The room fell silent for a moment. Even Harrison looked uncomfortable. Diane gently steered us back to the legal matters. To summarize our position, under the terms of the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties, Meridian Global Advisors and all associated accounts remain Ms. Chen's separate property. The penthouse, having been paid off with funds from those separate accounts, is now solely in Ms. Chen's name with proper documentation. Mr. Donovan is entitled to his separate property as outlined in the same agreement. Harrison cleared his throat. We'll need time to review these documents thoroughly and may request additional verification. Of course, Diane replied graciously. In the meantime, we propose Mr. Donovan vacate the penthouse within 14 days, as it is now Ms. Chen's separate property. Michael's head snapped up. 14 days? That's absurd. Where am I supposed to go? I couldn't resist. Perhaps Jessica Palmer's place? The Ritz-Carlton seems to have worked well for you two last month. His face went completely white. Harrison placed a warning hand on his arm as Michael opened his mouth to respond. We'll need to discuss living arrangements separately, Harrison said quickly. For now, let's focus on verification of these financial records. The meeting continued for another hour, with Harrison requesting clarification on various accounts and transactions. I answered each question with precision and supporting documentation, watching as Michael's confident demeanor crumbled further with each exchange. When we finally concluded, Michael made a point of leaving first, not meeting my eyes as he stalked out with Harrison close behind. Only when the door closed did I let out a slow, steadying breath. Diane gathered her papers with a satisfied smile. That went even better than I expected. His attorney knows they have no case against the prenup. He'll try something else, I said, knowing Michael's persistence. His ego won't let him accept this. Let him try, Diane replied. We have facts, documentation, and the law on our side. Men like your husband rely on intimidation and assumptions. You've undermined both. As I left Diane's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. This isn't over. We need to talk. Alone. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say that legal representatives couldn't communicate more effectively. The time for private conversations had ended when he called me worthless. Instead of going directly home, I took a detour to the harbor, finding a quiet bench overlooking the water. For the first time since receiving Michael's divorce text, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of emotions I'd been controlling. Anger at years of dismissal, sadness for the partnership I'd thought we were building, and beneath it all, a profound relief that the pretense was finally over. My phone buzzed again. Not Michael this time, but Ms. Wong, my most important client, requesting a video call to discuss market movements in Singapore. I smiled, straightening my shoulders as I headed back to my car. This was my reality now. No more compartmentalizing, no more downplaying my success, no more living in the shadow of someone else's narrative. As I drove back to the penthouse, I made a mental list of changes I'd implement once it was truly mine alone, starting with converting Michael's precious man cave into an expanded home office worthy of Meridian Global's growing operations. When I arrived, I found Michael waiting in the lobby, pacing near the elevators. He'd clearly come straight from the meeting, his expression a mix of anger and something else. Confusion, perhaps, or even a reluctant respect. We need to talk, he said as I approached. We just spent 2 hours talking with our attorneys present. Not like that. He lowered his voice. This is between us, Amanda. 7 years of marriage deserves a real conversation, not legal posturing. I studied him for a moment, considering my options. Part of me wanted to refuse on principle, but another part, the part that had once loved this man, recognized the genuine distress beneath his controlled exterior. Fine. 10 minutes. We rode the elevator in silence, the tension between us almost tangible. Inside the penthouse, I deliberately chose to sit at the kitchen island rather than the living room sofa where we'd spent countless evenings together. Some boundaries needed to be physical as well as emotional. Michael remained standing, loosening his tie in that familiar gesture that once signaled the transition from public to private self. Why didn't you tell me? He asked finally. These years, this whole separate financial life. Why the secrecy? It wasn't secrecy, Michael. It was self-preservation. I kept my tone even. Every time I tried to discuss my work seriously, you changed the subject or made it clear you weren't interested. That's not true, he protested. I supported your career. You supported the idea of my career, the convenient narrative of a wife with a little job to keep her busy. You never supported the reality of what I was building. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew well. How was I supposed to know you were running some international finance empire if you never said anything? Empire is an exaggeration, I replied. And I did say things. You didn't listen. Give me one example, he challenged. The Wong account. 3 years ago, when they increased their portfolio with me to over $800 million, I mentioned it at dinner. You were on your phone the entire time, occasionally nodding. When I finished explaining the significance, you said, and I quote, "That's nice, honey. Did you remember to call the plumber about the guest bathroom?" Michael's expression flickered with recognition. I was in the middle of the Westridge merger. That was a critical week. Every week was critical for you. My work never was. I kept my voice steady. Then there was the Singapore office opening. I invited you to come with me for the launch event. You said you couldn't possibly take time off for a vacation disguised as work. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I may have underestimated some things. You systematically devalued everything I built, Michael. Not maliciously. That would almost be easier to forgive. You did it casually, thoughtlessly, because in your mind, my work could never be as important as yours. So this whole thing, the separate accounts, paying off the mortgage without telling me, it was what? Revenge? I shook my head, disappointed that even now he couldn't understand. It was independence, protection, the recognition that a man who couldn't see my value professionally would eventually extend that blindness to other areas of our relationship. Like you did any better, he countered, anger edging back into his voice. You built this whole separate life while pretending to be the wife I thought I married. I never pretended anything. I was exactly who I always was. You created a fictional version of me that was easier for you to understand. Michael leaned against the counter, suddenly looking exhausted. So where does this leave us? You've made your point. You're not financially dependent on me. But does that mean our entire marriage was a sham? Not a sham, I said more gently. Just incomplete. We never truly saw each other. And Jessica? He asked quietly. How long have you known? Long enough, but that's not why we're getting divorced, Michael. We were over long before you met her. He nodded slowly, a reluctant acknowledgement of a truth we had both been avoiding. 14 days isn't much time to find a new place. Take 30, I offered, but use the guest room. I think we both need the space. Generous, he said with a hint of the old sarcasm. Then, more seriously, I didn't mean it, you know. What I said in that text, about you being worthless. Yes, you did, I replied simply. In that moment, you meant it completely. The problem isn't that you said it, Michael. It's that you could think it at all. He had no response to that. After a moment, he straightened, adjusting his cuffs, another familiar gesture that now seemed like a relic from a different life. I'll start looking for a place tomorrow. Good. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't see you. The real you. I offered him a small, final smile. I'm not. If you had, we might still be together, and I'd still be compromising parts of myself to fit your narrative. Some blindness turns out to be a blessing. After Michael left for the guest room, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto the terrace overlooking the harbor. The lights of the city reflected on the dark water, a mirror image of reality that only existed from a certain perspective. 7 years of marriage dissolving not with a dramatic fight, but with the quiet recognition that we had been living in parallel universes all along. There was a certain peace in that realization, the end of pretending, the beginning of authenticity. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more legal discussions, more unraveling of the life we had constructed. But tonight, standing alone above the city I had conquered in ways Michael never understood, I felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Grateful that he had underestimated me all these years. grateful that I had protected myself when no one else would. Grateful, even, for the dismissive text that had finally freed me from the exhaustion of being unseen. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Another potential client, referred by Ms. Wong, a Japanese technology magnate looking for discreet wealth management services. I smiled, taking a sip of wine as I composed a response, scheduling a video call for the following morning. Michael's universe might be contracting, but mine was expanding by the day. I wondered if he would ever truly understand what he had lost. Not just a wife, but a partner who could have helped him reach heights he couldn't imagine on his own. His loss, not mine. Over the next 2 weeks, Michael and I established an uneasy routine of avoidance. He left early each morning and returned late, spending minimal time in the penthouse. I reclaimed spaces that had previously been dominated by his preferences, replacing dark leather with light fabrics, adding art that he had deemed too abstract for our shared spaces. The legal proceedings continued methodically. Michael's attorney made several attempts to challenge the prenuptial agreement, each more desperate than the last. First came the claim that I had hidden assets at the time of signing, rendering the agreement invalid due to non-disclosure. Diane easily countered with my complete financial records from before our marriage. Then came the argument that I had exerted undue influence over the drafting of the prenup. This was almost laughable. Michael had been the one to insist on the agreement in the first place, concerned about protecting his family's modest trust fund and his future earnings at the law firm. He's grasping at straws, Diane told me after the third failed challenge, but he's billing by the hour, so expect this to continue until Mr. Donovan's retainer runs out. I wasn't worried. Each week brought new clients to Meridian Global, particularly as word spread through Singapore's tight-knit financial community about my firm's impressive returns during recent market volatility. While Michael spent his energy fighting a losing battle, I was building something substantial. The watershed moment came unexpectedly. I was working late one evening when I received a call from Linda Bartlett, the managing partner at Michael's law firm. Linda and I had met several times at firm functions, though our interactions had always been cordial rather than friendly. "Amanda," she began without preamble, "I hope I'm not overstepping, but I'd like to discuss something of a sensitive nature." I set aside my laptop, immediately alert. "Of course, Linda. What can I help you with?" "I understand you're in the process of divorcing Michael." "That's correct." There was a brief pause before she continued. "Normally, I wouldn't involve myself in a partner's personal matters, but something has come to my attention that concerns the firm." I waited, suspecting where this might be heading. "We've recently been approached by a significant potential client, Takashi Industries. They're looking for representation in a series of North American acquisitions." The name was immediately familiar. "Hiroshi Takashi." "Yes." Linda sounded surprised. "You know him?" "I manage his family's personal investments." A longer pause this time. "That explains a lot. Mr. Takashi specifically requested that Michael not be involved in their representation. When pressed, he indicated that there might be a conflict of interest related to you." I kept my voice neutral. "I see. Amanda, I'm going to be direct. The Takashi account would be worth millions in billable hours to Preston and Hughes. If Michael's personal situation is interfering with the firm's ability to secure this client, that becomes a partnership matter." I understood the subtext immediately. Michael's vindictive approach to our divorce was now threatening his professional standing. "What exactly are you asking me, Linda?" "I'm not asking anything," she replied carefully. "I'm simply making you aware that Michael's handling of personal matters may have professional repercussions that he hasn't considered." After she hung up, I sat with this new information. I had never sought to harm Michael's career. That had never been my objective. But his own actions, His inability to separate personal resentment from professional judgment were creating consequences I hadn't anticipated. The next morning, I found Michael in the kitchen, preparing coffee before heading to work. It was the first time in days we'd been in the same room without attorneys present. "We need to talk," I said, accepting the cup of coffee he automatically poured for me. One habit from our marriage that persisted despite everything. "If it's about the Peterson account disclosure, my lawyer already—" "It's not about that," I interrupted. "It's about Takashi Industries." Michael's expression shifted, wariness replacing the automatic defensiveness. "What about them?" "They're considering Preston and Hughes for their North American representation." "I'm aware," he said slowly. "Linda mentioned they were a significant potential client. They're also my client, the family's investment portfolio, not the corporate." Sighed. I watched comprehension dawn on his face, followed quickly by alarm. "Are you saying you've interfered with—" "I've done nothing," I stated firmly. "But your handling of our divorce has created a perception issue. Hiroshi Takashi values loyalty and discretion above all else. When he learned how you've been approaching our separation—" Michael set his coffee down carefully. "How would he know anything about our divorce? The financial world is smaller than you think. Ms. Wong and Hiroshi are close associates. Word travels." For the first time since this process began, I saw genuine fear in Michael's eyes. Not just about losing money or property, but about damaging something he truly valued: his professional reputation. "What are you suggesting?" he asked, his voice tight. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm informing you that your actions have consequences beyond our marriage. How you choose to respond is entirely up to you." Michael stared at me for a long moment. "Is this some kind of threat? Agree to my terms, or you'll ruin my career." "No," I said simply. "It's a reality check. I've never discussed our private matters with my clients. I've never sought to damage your professional standing. But the aggressive approach you've taken, the baseless accusations against my business practices, these things have repercussions in a world where reputation matters." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen countless times during our marriage when he felt cornered. "What do you want from me, Amanda?" "Nothing I haven't already stated through proper legal channels. Honor the prenuptial agreement you insisted upon. Accept that my business and its success are legitimate. Stop trying to paint me as deceptive for building something you never bothered to understand." Michael was silent for several moments, assessing his options with the tactical precision that made him an effective attorney. Finally, he nodded once, sharply. "I'll speak with Harrison." "Good." I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "For what it's worth, I was wrong." I glanced back. "About? You, your business, what you're capable of." His expression was unreadable. "I underestimated you." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You did." 2 days later, Harrison contacted Diane with a surprising proposal. Michael was willing to accept the terms of the prenuptial agreement without further contest and would vacate the penthouse within the originally proposed 14 days. In exchange, he requested only that I sign a non-disparagement agreement covering both personal and professional matters. "It's a standard clause," Diane explained, "though usually they're mutual. He's only asking you to refrain from negative comments without binding himself to the same." "That's fine," I replied. "I have no interest in discussing Michael with anyone once this is over." "Are you sure? This is unusually one-sided." I smiled. He's finally realized his vulnerability isn't financial, it's reputational. He's protecting the only asset he truly values, his image. The revised settlement agreement was signed the next day. Michael moved out the following weekend, leaving his keys on the kitchen counter with a brief note. "I'm staying at the Charles Hotel until I find a permanent place. Forward any mail." No apology, no acknowledgement of our 7 years together, just logistics. It was fitting, in a way. Our marriage had ended long before the divorce began, eroded by his systematic dismissal of my worth. As I stood in the emptier penthouse, now fully mine, I felt no triumph, only a quiet certainty that I was finally stepping into a life without compromise or diminishment. The view of Boston Harbor stretched before me, unchanged, yet somehow different, like seeing a familiar landscape from a new elevation. My phone rang, Ms. Wong calling from Singapore. "Amanda," she greeted me warmly. "I've been meaning to ask about your expansion plans. Have you considered opening a London office to complement Singapore?" I smiled, thinking of the business proposal I'd been developing for precisely that purpose. As a matter of fact, I have some thoughts on that very subject. Would you be interested in being an anchor client for a European operation? As we discussed possibilities, projections, and strategies, I moved through the penthouse, mentally redesigning spaces to better reflect the woman I had become. Not Michael's wife, not the supportive partner to someone else's ambitions, but the architect of my own carefully constructed universe. In the guest room where Michael had spent his final weeks, I found a forgotten cufflink on the dresser, platinum with a small diamond, a gift I'd given him for our 3rd anniversary. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my palm. Some women might have kept it as a reminder, either of good times past or lessons learned. Instead, I dropped it into the envelope with his keys and unfinished note. I would have it messengered to the Charles Hotel the next day. I had no need for mementos from a man who had called me worthless. My offshore accounts, and the freedom they represented, were reminder enough. 3 months after Michael moved out of the penthouse, I found myself in Singapore, finalizing the lease on Meridian Global's new expanded offices in the prestigious Marina Bay Financial Center. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the harbor and the iconic Marina Bay Sands, a fitting backdrop for the next phase of my company's growth. "Ms. Chen, everything is ready for the team to begin moving in next week," said Liam Chen, no relation, the property manager who had been handling the arrangements. "The secure server room has been built to your specifications, and the biometric access controls are operational." I nodded, running my hand along the sleek conference table that dominated the main meeting room. "Perfect. And the residential accommodations?" "The service apartment in the adjacent tower is prepared as well. 3 bedrooms, fully furnished, with the home office equipment you requested." This trip to Singapore represented more than just a business expansion. After the divorce was finalized, I had decided to split my time between Boston and Singapore, spending at least 6 months of the year closer to my primary client base. The city-state's efficient business environment, strategic location, and sophisticated financial ecosystem made it the ideal second home for both me and Meridian Global. "The movers will deliver your personal items tomorrow," Liam continued, "and Ms. Wong has invited you to dinner this evening at Odette to celebrate your relocation." I smiled at the mention of my most important client, who had become something of a mentor over the years. "Please confirm with her that 7:30 works." As Liam left to make the arrangements, I walked the perimeter of the office, mentally placing my growing team in their new workspace. Meridian had expanded from my solo operation to a staff of 11 over the past year: 5 financial analysts, 3 client relations specialists, 2 administrative assistants, and a compliance officer. The Singapore office would eventually house most of the team, with only a skeleton crew remaining in Boston to service our North American clients. My phone buzzed with an email notification. I expected it to be from Diane, with updates on the final property transfers in Boston. Instead, the sender was Preston and Hughes Law, Michael's firm. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. The divorce had been finalized 6 weeks ago, with Michael ultimately accepting the terms of the prenuptial agreement after his multiple challenges failed. There was nothing left to discuss, no loose ends that required addressing. Curiosity won. Out. I opened the email. To Amanda Chen. From Linda Bartlett, L. Bartlett, Preston Hughes. Come subject. Professional inquiry. Dear Ms. Chen, I hope this message finds you well. While we have met socially in the past, I am reaching out today in my capacity as managing partner at Preston & Hughes. Our firm is expanding our international practice, particularly in Asian markets. Your expertise in Singapore's financial sector has been noted by several of our clients, including Takashi Industries. I would like to discuss the possibility of retaining Meridian Global advisors for consulting services related to our Asia-Pacific expansion. If you're amenable, perhaps we could arrange a video call next week to discuss further details. This inquiry is, of course, entirely separate from any personal matters that may have arisen in the past. Best regards, Linda Bartlett, Managing Partner, Preston & Hughes Law. I read the email twice, trying to decipher its true intent. Was this a genuine business inquiry or some elaborate scheme Michael had engineered to reinsert himself into my life? The mention of Takashi Industries seemed deliberately pointed, given their role in Michael's eventual capitulation during our divorce proceedings. After careful consideration, I drafted a response. Dear Ms. Bartlett, thank you for your inquiry. Meridian Global Advisors is selective about consulting relationships, but I would be open to discussing how we might assist Preston & Hughes with your Asia-Pacific strategy. I should note that our services focus exclusively on financial markets, investment structures, and wealth management in the region. We do not provide legal advice or referrals to legal services. I am currently in Singapore establishing our new regional headquarters. I can make myself available for a video call next Tuesday at 9 p.m. SGT, 9 a.m. Boston time. Please confirm if this timing works for you. Regards, Amanda Chen, Founder and CEO, Meridian Global Advisors. The boundary was clearly established. This would be strictly professional if it happened at all. I had no interest in using business as a pretext for reopening old wounds. Later that evening, as I was dressing for dinner with Ms. Wong, my phone rang with a Boston number I didn't recognize. Amanda Chen, I answered, slipping on a pair of emerald earrings that complemented my black sheath dress. Amanda, it's Linda Bartlett. Her voice was crisp and professional. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I checked my watch. It was 6:45 p.m. in Singapore, making it 6:45 a.m. in Boston. Early for a business call. I was just preparing for a dinner engagement, but I have a moment. Is this regarding your email? Yes, in part. There was a slight hesitation in her voice. I wanted to speak with you directly rather than continue via email. Our firm is serious about expanding our Asia-Pacific presence, and your expertise would be invaluable. I'm flattered, but curious about the timing. Your firm has had international ambitions for years. Why approach Meridian Global now? Linda's sigh was audible. I'll be direct, Amanda. The partners voted last week to ask Michael to take a leave of absence. This was unexpected. I see. May I ask why? Several reasons, most of which I'm not at liberty to discuss. What I can say is that his handling of certain client relationships has become problematic. The Takashi situation was just the beginning. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. The point is, Linda went on, Michael's personal feelings about your divorce appear to be affecting his professional judgment in ways that are becoming detrimental to the firm. We need to establish a foothold in Singapore regardless of his situation, and frankly, you're the most qualified advisor we could approach. And Michael knows you're contacting me. He was informed of the partner's decision to pursue this. Relationship? Yes. I considered the implications. Working with Preston & Hughes would be lucrative and strategically beneficial for Meridian Global's profile. The fact that it would also serve as a constant reminder to Michael of what he had dismissed for so many years was, I had to admit, a satisfying bonus. "I'm still available for the video call on Tuesday," I said finally. "We can discuss specific parameters then." "Excellent. One more thing, Amanda." Linda's tone shifted slightly. "This is somewhat delicate, but there are rumors that Michael has been making inquiries about your client relationships in Singapore. Nothing concrete, but I thought you should be aware." My grip on the phone tightened. "What kind of inquiries?" "Apparently, he's been reaching out to contacts at competing law firms, asking about Meridian Global's client acquisition methods, fee structures, and whether any potential regulatory issues have ever been raised." A cold anger settled in my chest. Even now, Michael couldn't accept that my success was legitimate, that I had built something substantial through expertise and hard work rather than some imagined shortcut. "Thank you for the information, Linda. I appreciate your candor." After we ended the call, I sat on the edge of my bed, processing this new development. Michael was actively trying to find flaws in my business practices, perhaps hoping to discover something he could use to reopen our financial settlement, or simply to damage what I had built out of spite. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, he had shown zero interest in understanding my work. Now that it had proven to be valuable, more valuable than he had ever imagined, he couldn't stop investigating it. I placed a call to Diane before heading out for dinner. "He's fishing for dirt," she confirmed after I explained the situation. Classic move when a party feels they've lost more than they expected in a settlement. But unless he finds evidence of actual fraud, which we know doesn't exist, there's nothing he can do legally at this point. "It's not the legal implications I'm concerned about," I replied. "It's the potential damage to Meridian's reputation. Financial management is built on trust. Even baseless rumors can be harmful." "Do you want me to have a conversation with Harrison?" Diane asked, referring to Michael's attorney. "A gentle reminder about the non-disparagement clause in your settlement might be appropriate." "Not yet. Let's see what else develops. In the meantime, I'll tighten security on our client communications and make sure everyone on my team knows to report any unusual inquiries." After ending the call with Diane, I took a moment to compose myself before heading to dinner. I wouldn't allow Michael's desperate maneuvers to overshadow this important evening with Ms. Wong, or the exciting new chapter I was beginning in Singapore. Odette was housed in the National Gallery, its elegant interior a fitting showcase for the 3 Michelin-starred French cuisine it was known for. Ms. Wong was already seated when I arrived, impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit, her silver hair swept into a perfect chignon. "Amanda!" She greeted me warmly, rising slightly as I approached. "You look wonderful. Singapore agrees with you already." I smiled, taking the seat across from her. "It feels right to be here more permanently. The financial district has changed so much since I first visited 10 years ago." "As have you," she observed, studying me with shrewd eyes. "There's a new certainty in your demeanor. Freedom suits you." Ms. Wong had a gift for seeing through carefully constructed facades. I had never explicitly discussed my marital problems with her, but she had undoubtedly noticed the subtle shifts in my behavior over the years. "I've learned a great deal in recent months," I acknowledged. "About business, certainly, but more about myself." "The most valuable education," she agreed, raising her glass of champagne. "To new beginnings." As we enjoyed the exquisite tasting menu, our conversation ranged from market projections to Meridian's expansion plans. Unlike Michael, who had always glossed over the details of my work, Ms. Wong engaged deeply with the strategic implications of each decision. "Your new office location is excellent," she commented. "Close to the monetary authority, the major banks, and the exchange. Proximity still matters in our business, despite all the technology." That was my thinking as well. We'll be able to respond more quickly to market movements in Asian trading hours. She nodded approvingly. "And your living arrangements?" The service apartment is only temporary, I assume? For now. I'm considering purchasing something in Sentosa Cove eventually. I've always loved being near the water. A wise investment, Ms. Wong agreed. Property values there have been remarkably resilient, even during market downturns. As dessert was served, a delicate construction of chocolate and passion fruit, Ms. Wong's expression grew more serious. Amanda, there's something I should mention. A former associate of yours made some inquiries about Meridian Global recently. My spoon paused midway to my mouth. Michael Donovan? She raised an eyebrow, impressed. You've already heard? Yes. He approached James Lim at Waterstone Legal last week, asking rather pointed questions about your client acquisition strategies. Waterstone was one of Singapore's premier law firms, specializing in financial regulations and compliance, a direct competitor to Preston and Hughes in the international arena. Did he find a receptive audience? I asked carefully. Ms. Wong's smile was thin. James called me immediately. He was curious about why a Boston attorney was so interested in the business practices of a Singapore-based wealth management firm. I explained that Mr. Donovan might have personal motivations for his inquiries. Relief washed over me. The financial community in Singapore was tight-knit, built on relationships developed over decades. Ms. Wong's influence extended far beyond her considerable wealth. Thank you, I said simply. She waved away my gratitude. The financial world has enough challenges without adding personal vendettas to the mix. Besides, Meridian Global's reputation is impeccable. Your compliance procedures are more rigorous than most firms twice your size. After dinner, Ms. Wong's driver took us both to the Marina Bay area, her to her penthouse at the Sail, me to my temporary residence in the financial district. As we parted, she took my hand in both of hers. Don't let this distract you from what matters, Amanda. Men, like your ex-husband, cannot stand to see women succeed on their own terms. It challenges everything they believe about themselves. Her words stayed with me as I settled into my new space that evening. The apartment was beautifully appointed but still felt temporary, a transitional space between the life I had left behind in Boston and whatever came next. I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto the balcony, taking in the spectacular view of Singapore's skyline. The city pulsed with energy even at this late hour, a testament to its position as a global financial hub that bridged Eastern and Western markets. My phone buzzed with a text notification. Unknown number, but the Boston area code was familiar. Heard you're in Singapore expanding your empire. Convenient timing? Running away? Michael, I should have expected this. Linda's call had clearly triggered something in him. Perhaps the realization that his firm valued my business acumen more than his personal vendetta. I didn't respond, instead blocking the number and making a mental note to have my assistant change my personal phone number tomorrow. Michael no longer deserved access to any part of my life, professional or personal. The next morning, I woke early to join a 7 a.m. conference call with potential investors from Japan. As I prepared my notes, a breaking news alert flashed across my tablet screen. Preston and Hughes Law announces strategic partnership with Waterstone Legal for Asia-Pacific expansion. The accompanying press release mentioned Linda Bartlett as the key architect of the partnership, with no reference to Michael. This explained her sudden interest in Meridian Global's consulting services. The firm was making a major move into Asian markets, with or without Michael's involvement. I quickly searched for additional information and found a legal industry blog with more details. Sources inside Preston and Hughes confirmed that partner Michael Donovan, previously considered the firm's international point person, has taken an unexpected leave of absence amid rumors of client relationship challenges. My meeting with Linda suddenly made more sense. She wasn't just looking for consulting services, she was doing damage control, ensuring that Michael's personal issues wouldn't interfere with the firm's expansion plans. After my conference call concluded successfully, the Japanese investors committing to a significant portfolio, I received an email from my Boston office manager. Amanda. Just a heads up that a man claiming to be a potential client tried to arrange a meeting with Sophia yesterday, asking very specific questions about our client onboarding procedures and compliance protocols. When pressed for details about his investment needs, he became evasive. Sophia recognized him from a firm photo as Michael Donovan and declined the meeting per your instructions regarding former personal connections. Security has been notified not to allow him access to our office. Do you want us to take any additional measures? Best. Taylor. The audacity was almost impressive. Michael had actually attempted to infiltrate my Boston office, presumably hoping to find anything he could use against me. His desperation was becoming more evident by the day. I replied quickly, Taylor. Thank you for the alert. Please ensure all staff are reminded of our confidentiality protocols. No information about clients, procedures, or business operations is to be shared with anyone without proper verification and authorization. Also, please accelerate our planned office relocation. I'd like to be moved to the new Back Bay location before the end of the month if possible. I'll be sending updated security protocols for both physical and digital assets later today. Amanda. Moving the Boston office had been on my agenda for the next quarter, but Michael's increasingly erratic behavior made it a priority. The current location was too accessible, too familiar to him. A fresh start in a more secure building would eliminate at least one vulnerability. My phone rang. Diane calling from Boston. Amanda, we need to talk about Michael's recent activities. She began without preamble. I've received some concerning information from a colleague at the Massachusetts Bar Association. What now? I sighed, looking out at the Singapore skyline that represented my future, frustrated that Michael was still intruding on my present. He's filed a complaint with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, suggesting potential irregularities in Meridian Global's handling of international transfers. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. FinCEN complaints were serious, even when baseless. The investigation process alone could be disruptive and potentially damaging to client relationships. On what grounds? The complaint is vague, alleging unusual patterns of fund movement between jurisdictions and concerning relationships with entities in tax-advantaged locations. It's clearly phishing, but FinCEN is obligated to at least perform a preliminary review. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think strategically rather than emotionally. This crosses a line, Diane. He's now directly attacking my business, not just me personally. I agree. This goes beyond the typical post-divorce pettiness. He's deliberately trying to damage Meridian Global's reputation and operations. Options? I asked, already mentally reviewing our compliance documentation and transaction records. Everything was meticulously maintained and fully legitimate, but an investigation would still require significant time and resources to address. Several, Diane replied. First, we prepare a comprehensive response to FinCEN, demonstrating the legitimate business purposes behind every transaction pattern they question. Our compliance records should make this straightforward. Already underway, I confirmed. What else? Second, we file for a temporary restraining order prohibiting Michael from making further false claims about you or Meridian Global to regulatory bodies, clients, or other financial institutions. How strong is that case? Given the pattern of behavior, including his attempted infiltration of your Boston office and his inquiries to competitors in Singapore, I think it's solid. The non-disparagement clause in your settlement agreement strengthens our position. I considered our next move carefully. There's a risk in escalating this publicly. A legal battle could generate exactly the type of attention we want to avoid. True, Diane acknowledged. But there's also a risk in allowing him to continue unchecked. If he's willing to file false regulatory complaints, what's next? She had a point. Michael's actions were becoming increasingly desperate and unpredictable. Setting clear boundaries through legal means might be necessary to protect what I had built. Let's proceed with both approaches, I decided. Prepare the FinCEN response and the restraining order request. But before filing the latter, have Harrison warned informally. Give Michael one last chance to back down gracefully. Are you sure? He hasn't exactly demonstrated reasonable behavior so far. One chance, Diane. Not for his sake, but for mine. I want to be able to say I took the high road even when he went low. After ending the call with Diane, I sat at my desk in the new Singapore office, surrounded by the trappings of my success. The success Michael had dismissed for so many years and was now obsessed with destroying. The irony was palpable. If he had shown even a fraction of this interest in my business during our marriage, perhaps things would have unfolded differently. My assistant knocked gently on the open door. Ms. Chen? The design team is here to discuss the final touches for the office layout. I nodded, pushing thoughts of Michael and his vindictive campaign to the back of my mind. Send them in. As I reviewed color palettes and furniture selections, making decisions about the physical manifestation of Meridian Global's future, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Michael might be stuck in the past, consumed by what he had lost, but I was building something that would last long after his petty grievances were forgotten. The rest of the day passed in a blur of productive meetings, finalizing the expansion of our analyst team, reviewing new portfolio management software, and approving the marketing materials for our enhanced family office services. It was nearly 4 p.m. when my phone rang with a Boston number I recognized as Harrison Wells, Michael's attorney. Ms. Chen, he began formally, I hope I'm not disturbing you at this late hour. It's morning in Singapore, Mr. Wells. What can I do for you? I've received a communication from Diane Lowell regarding some concerns about Mr. Donovan's recent activities. I wanted to address this directly before things escalate unnecessarily. I kept my tone neutral. I appreciate that approach. Mr. Donovan has been under considerable stress recently, as I'm sure you can understand. His professional standing at Preston & Hughes has been complicated by recent events. His professional standing is his responsibility, not mine. Harrison cleared his throat uncomfortably. Of course. However, he feels that certain aspects of your financial arrangements during the marriage were not fully disclosed, leading to what he perceives as an inequitable settlement. Every aspect of my financial affairs was properly documented and disclosed during our proceedings, I replied firmly. Mr. Donovan had ample opportunity to review that documentation with expert assistance. The fact that he failed to understand my business during our marriage is not a basis for revisiting a legally binding settlement. Nevertheless, his concerns have led him to seek certain clarifications through various channels. Filing false complaints with financial regulators goes beyond seeking clarifications, Mr. Wells. It constitutes harassment and potentially defamation. There was a pause before Harrison continued, his tone more measured. I've advised Mr. Donovan that pursuing this path is not in his best interest. I believe he may be receptive to a more constructive approach if certain assurances could be provided. What kind of assurances? Perhaps a joint statement clarifying that your business successes were achieved through legitimate means and without any improper advantage gained through your marriage to Mr. Donovan. I almost laughed at the audacity. Mr. Wells, your client, called me worthless when he asked for this divorce. He has spent the subsequent months attempting to discredit and damage the business I built despite his dismissal. And now he wants me to issue a statement protecting his reputation. It would be mutually beneficial, Harrison suggested weakly. What would be beneficial is for Mr. Donovan to cease his harassment immediately. Diane has prepared a request for a restraining order that will be filed if any further regulatory complaints, disparaging communications, or attempts to interfere with my business occur. I suggest you make that very clear to your client. The silence that followed told me Harrison understood the gravity of the situation. When he spoke again, his tone was resigned. "I'll convey your position to Mr. Donovan." After ending the call, I gazed out at Singapore's glittering skyline, feeling both vindicated and weary. The divorce should have been the end of my entanglement with Michael, but his wounded pride had prolonged the conflict. Now I could only hope that the threat of legal consequences would finally force him to move on, to accept that the worthless wife he had dismissed had built something valuable entirely without his knowledge or support. My phone buzzed with a message from Ms. Wang. "Dinner tomorrow? I've heard from several interesting potential clients who would like to meet you." I smiled, typing a quick acceptance. This was my world now, a world of opportunity and respect that Michael had never been able to see, even when it was right, in front of him. As I prepared for bed in my temporary Singapore apartment, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would contact a real estate agent about that property in Sentosa Cove. It was time to put down permanent roots in the place where my work and worth had always been recognized. Michael could continue fighting yesterday's battles if he chose. I would be too busy building tomorrow. 6 months into my Singapore relocation, Meridian Global had doubled its client roster and expanded to a team of 23 professionals across both offices. The consulting arrangement with Preston and Hughes had proven unexpectedly lucrative, with our guidance helping the firm secure 3 major clients in the Asian market. Linda Bartlett had become something of an ally, our professional relationship built on mutual respect and a shared understanding of what excellence in our respective fields required. Michael remained on his leave of absence from the firm, though I'd heard through industry circles that he was interviewing with smaller practices in Boston. The restraining order had never been necessary. Harrison Wells had apparently convinced him that further antagonism would only damage whatever professional future he still hoped to salvage. I'd settled into my newly purchased villa in Sentosa Cove, a stunning waterfront property with private dock access and panoramic views of the South China Sea. The purchase had made the local business pages. American financial whiz makes permanent. Home in Singapore, accompanied by a professional photo that captured me against the backdrop of Marina Bay, the city skyline glittering behind me. That morning, as I reviewed quarterly reports in my home office, my assistant Grace called with an unusual message. "Ms. Chen, there's an email from Jessica Palmer requesting a meeting. She says it's regarding Michael Donovan." Jessica Palmer, Michael's affair partner, the associate from his firm whose hotel reservation had first alerted me to his infidelity. "What exactly does she want?" I asked. My curiosity piqued despite my better judgment. "She doesn't specify, only that it's urgent and personal. She's apparently in Singapore for a conference and would like to meet in person." I considered declining outright. There was nothing Jessica could tell me about Michael that I needed to know. Nothing that could affect my life now that the divorce was finalized and my business was thriving half a world away from Boston. Yet something about the unusual request intrigued me. Why would Jessica Palmer, of all people, reach out to me directly? What could possibly be urgent about anything related to Michael now? "Tell her I can spare 30 minutes tomorrow morning. She can come to the office at 10 a.m. The next day, I arrived at Meridian Global's Singapore headquarters earlier than usual, reviewing the background check our security team had run on Jessica Palmer. 32 years old, graduated from Columbia, law with honors, joined Preston and Hughes 4 years ago as a lateral hire from a New York firm, specialized in intellectual property law with a focus on technology clients. No criminal record, excellent credit score, active member in good standing of both the New York and Massachusetts bar. Nothing surprising, though I noted with interest that she was still employed at Preston and Hughes, despite her affair with Michael becoming common knowledge. Either the firm was more forgiving of such indiscretions than I'd imagined, or Jessica had managed to distance herself from the situation effectively. At precisely 10 a.m., Grace showed Jessica into my office. She was attractive in a conventional way. Tall, slender, with straight blonde hair and the carefully maintained appearance of someone who understood the importance of presentation in professional settings. She wore a navy suit that spoke of quality without ostentation, though the slight nervousness in her demeanor undercut the polished exterior. "Ms. Chen," she began, extending her hand. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. I know this is unusual." I shook her hand briefly, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "I'll admit I'm curious about what brings you to my office, Ms. Palmer, especially given our connection." Jessica took a seat, placing her handbag carefully beside her. "I want to be clear that I'm here without Michael's knowledge. He would be furious if he knew I was speaking with you. That makes two of us with reasons to limit our association with Michael Donovan," I replied dryly. "Why exactly are you here?" She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself. "Michael is planning to file a lawsuit against you and Meridian Global Advisors, alleging that you misappropriated client contacts from Preston and Hughes during your marriage to build your business." I kept my expression neutral, though internally I was both amused and irritated by Michael's continued desperation. That's absurd. My client relationships predated my marriage, and I never once leveraged Michael's firm connections for Meridian's benefit. "I know," Jessica said quietly. "That's why I'm here." This was unexpected. I studied her more carefully. "Go on." "Michael has been obsessed with discrediting you since the divorce. At first I thought it was just wounded pride, but it's become something more disturbing. He's fabricating evidence, Amanda." "What kind of evidence?" Jessica reached into her handbag and removed a USB drive, placing it on my desk. "Email exchanges that never happened. Backdated memos suggesting you requested confidential client information from him. Even a falsified meeting calendar showing you attended firm client events where you supposedly made inappropriate solicitations." I stared at the drive, then back at Jessica. "Why are you giving me this?" Her composed facade cracked slightly. "Because it's wrong, and because I'm named as a witness in these fabricated scenarios. He wants me to corroborate his story under oath." "I'm still not clear on your motivation, Ms. Palmer. You were having an affair with my husband while we were married. Now you're concerned about ethics?" A flush spread across her cheeks. "I'm not proud of my relationship with Michael. It was a mistake. One that became abundantly clear once I saw how he behaved during your divorce. The man I thought I knew. It doesn't exist." "That's something we can agree on," I said, leaving the USB untouched on my desk. "What exactly do you expect me to do with this information?" "Prepare yourself. The lawsuit is draft form now, but Michael plans to file within the next 2 weeks. He's meeting with litigation funders in New York tomorrow, former clients who still trust him." I leaned back in my chair, processing this new development. Michael's vendetta had clearly evolved from petty post-divorce spite to something more calculated and potentially damaging. While any legitimate investigation would quickly reveal the falsehoods, the mere existence of such allegations could harm client relationships and undermine the trust Meridian Global had spent years building. "Why risk your career to warn me?" I asked finally. Jessica met my gaze directly. "Because I've worked too hard to tie my professional reputation to a vindictive lie. And because..." She hesitated briefly. "I've seen the way he talks about you, about your success. It's not right." That's surprisingly principled for someone who didn't mind sleeping with a married man. She flinched but didn't look away. "We all have regrets, Ms. Chen. I'm trying to correct one of mine." I considered my options carefully. The USB drive could contain exactly what Jessica claimed, evidence of Michael's planned fraud. Or it could be part of an elaborate trap, perhaps, even infected with malware designed to access Meridian systems. Trust didn't come easily in situations like this. "I appreciate the warning," I said finally, "but I'll need to have my security team verify the contents of this drive before I can take any action." "Of course." Jessica stood, adjusting her suit jacket. There's one more thing you should know. Michael liquidated his retirement accounts last month. He's putting everything into this lawsuit, financially and emotionally. He's convinced himself that destroying your reputation is the only way to salvage his. After Jessica left, I immediately called Diane in Boston and had our IT security team set up a quarantined environment to examine the USB's contents. Within hours, they confirmed Jessica's claims. The drive contained dozens of fabricated documents and emails, meticulously crafted to suggest I had inappropriately used Michael's firm connections to build Meridian Global. He's gone completely off the deep end, Diane said when I briefed her on the situation. This isn't just harmful to you, it's potentially criminal. Fabricating evidence for a lawsuit constitutes fraud upon the court. Options? I asked, watching the sunset over Singapore's skyline from my office window. Several, none of them particularly pleasant. We could file for a preemptive injunction based on Jessica's testimony, but that would require her to go on record against Michael. Given her position at the firm, that's a significant risk for her. What else? We could approach Preston and Hughes directly. Linda Bartlett has a vested interest in protecting the firm's reputation, which would be damaged by association if Michael pursues this. A former partner filing a lawsuit built on demonstrably false evidence would reflect poorly on their oversight. I considered this path. Linda had proven to be straightforward in our dealings, and Meridian's consulting. Relationship with the firm provided a natural channel for communication. That might be our best first step, I agreed. I have a video call scheduled with Linda tomorrow regarding the Takashi expansion. I'll raise the issue then. In the meantime, Diane continued, we should prepare a comprehensive defense documentation package. Every client relationship predating your marriage to Michael, every legitimate business development channel Meridian used, proof that your success came through expertise and hard work rather than misappropriation. Already underway. I'll have the compliance team pull everything together. After ending the call with Diane, I sat with the weight of this new development. Just when I thought I had finally escaped Michael's toxic influence, he had found a new way to insert himself into my life, to threaten what I had built through years of dedication and expertise. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had once called me worthless was now so consumed by my success that he was willing to destroy himself professionally, financially, and ethically in a desperate attempt to tear it down. I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto the office balcony, gazing out at the bustling financial district below. Singapore had become my sanctuary, a place where my expertise was valued without qualification or dismissal. I had no intention of allowing Michael's vindictive fantasies to taint what I had created here. My phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Wong. Dinner at my home tomorrow evening? I have some interesting developments to discuss regarding the Malaysian expansion. I smiled, typing a quick acceptance. Whatever storm Michael was brewing in Boston, my life and business continued to move forward here in Singapore. The contrast couldn't have been more stark or more validating. The next morning, I prepared carefully for my video call with Linda Bartlett, organizing my thoughts on how best to approach the delicate subject of Michael's planned lawsuit. As managing partner, Linda had a responsibility to protect Preston and Hughes's reputation, but she also had a history with Michael as her colleague and partner. The balance had to be handled with diplomacy. When Linda's face appeared on my screen, I was surprised to see that she looked unusually tense. Amanda, she greeted me, dispensing with the usual pleasantries. Before we discuss the Takashi matter, there's something I need to address. Have you been in contact with Jessica Palmer? So Jessica hadn't been as discreet as she claimed. I decided transparency was the best approach. Yes, she came to see me yesterday. I assume she's informed you about the purpose of her visit? Linda nodded, her expression grim. She came to me this morning with the same information she shared with you. The situation is deeply troubling. That's an understatement. Your former partner is preparing to file a fraudulent lawsuit against a firm client based on fabricated evidence. Former being the operative word, Linda clarified. The partnership voted unanimously this morning to terminate Michael's relationship with Preston and Hughes, effective immediately. His personal belongings are being packed as we speak. This was a more decisive action than I had expected. That was quick. We had no choice. The ethical violations alone would be grounds for disbarment if they came to light in a court proceeding. The potential damage to the firm's reputation is incalculable. And Jessica's position? Linda's expression softened slightly. Protected for now. She made a mistake in her personal life, but she did the right thing professionally by coming forward. The firm recognizes that distinction. I assume Michael has been informed of the partnership's decision? Yes, Linda confirmed, her tone suggesting there was more to the story. His reaction was extreme. Security had to escort him from the building. He made some concerning statements on his way out. A chill ran through me. What kind of statements? Nothing specific enough to warrant immediate legal action, but enough that I felt you should be aware. He mentioned that you would regret ever crossing him, and that Singapore isn't far enough away to hide. The implicit threat was clear, even if the words themselves were vague enough to avoid legal consequences. Michael's obsession had progressed, from professional sabotage to something potentially more personal and dangerous. I appreciate the warning, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'll take appropriate precautions. I've already notified our security team about the potential for an international incident involving a former partner. If Michael attempts to travel to Singapore, we'll be alerted. After concluding the call with Linda, I immediately upgraded the security protocols for both my home and office. Additional guards were stationed at both locations. My driver was briefed on evasive maneuvers and the need for heightened awareness, and my personal schedule was removed from our company's shared calendar system. These measures felt somewhat excessive given that Michael was still presumably in Boston, but his increasingly erratic behavior warranted caution. A man who would fabricate evidence and risk his professional standing for revenge might be capable of more direct forms of retaliation. That evening, as my driver took me to Ms. Wong's residence in the exclusive Nassim Road neighborhood, I found myself scanning nearby vehicles with a vigilance that would have seemed paranoid just days earlier. Singapore was one of the safest cities in the world, with strict gun control laws and extensive surveillance, but Michael's threatening words had planted a seed of unease that was difficult to ignore. Ms. Wong's home was a stunning colonial-era, black and white bungalow, set behind high walls and lush tropical gardens. As I was escorted through the immaculate grounds to the main house, the peaceful surroundings helped ease some of my tension. My host greeted me in a spacious living room that seamlessly blended traditional Chinese antiques with contemporary furnishings. At 72, Ms. Wong remained one of the sharpest minds in Asian finance, having built her family's trading business into a diversified conglomerate worth billions. "Amanda," she said warmly, kissing my cheek in European fashion. "You seem troubled this evening." Her perceptiveness never failed to impress me. Just some lingering business concerns from Boston, nothing that can't be managed. She studied me for a moment longer, then nodded, accepting my brief explanation without pressing further. "Come, I've had chef prepare Peranakan specialties tonight. The Malaysian expansion we're discussing deserves an appropriate culinary backdrop." Over dinner, we discussed Meridian Global's potential involvement in a major development project in Johor Bahru, just across the causeway from Singapore. The Wong family conglomerate was considering a significant investment in the region, and Ms. Wong valued my assessment of the financial structures and potential returns. "The regulatory environment is evolving rapidly," I noted as we finished our main course. "But the proximity to Singapore offers unique advantages for international capital flows while maintaining certain tax benefits." Ms. Wong nodded thoughtfully. "My concern is the political stability factor. Malaysia's government has changed hands 3 times in recent years, which is why I'm recommending a phased investment approach with appropriate exit mechanisms built into each stage. We can structure it to... I was interrupted by my phone buzzing with an urgent message. Normally, I would never check my phone during dinner with someone of Ms. Wong's stature, but given the security concerns, I had instructed my team to contact me immediately with any unusual situations. "Please excuse me," I said, glancing at the screen. The message was from Grace. "Security alert at your residence. Attempted unauthorized entry. Police responding. All security protocols engaged." A cold wave of adrenaline washed over me. Could Michael have actually traveled to Singapore so quickly? It seemed impossible, yet the timing was too coincidental to dismiss. "I apologize, but I need to make an urgent call," I told Ms. Wong, who nodded with immediate understanding. Stepping onto the terrace, I called Grace directly. "What happened?" I asked without preamble. "Security cameras caught a man attempting to bypass the gate security system at your Sentosa home approximately 20 minutes ago," she explained. "When the alarm sounded, he fled the scene. Police are reviewing the footage now." Description: Caucasian male, middle-aged, wearing dark clothing and a cap that obscured most of his face. The security team couldn't make a positive identification from the footage. And the property? Secure. He never gained entry beyond the perimeter. Your security upgrades functioned exactly as intended. I took a deep breath, trying to process this development. "Has anyone checked the international arrival records? I need to know if Michael Donovan entered Singapore recently." "Already in progress. I've contacted our connection at the Immigration and Checkpoints Authority. They're searching the records now." "Good. Keep me updated and make sure the police have Michael's photo for comparison with the security footage." When I returned to the dining room, Ms. Wong was watching me with concern. "Not just business concerns, I think," she observed quietly. I hesitated, then decided that transparency with my most important client and mentor was the wisest course. "My ex-husband may have attempted to enter my property in Sentosa. The police are investigating now." Her expression hardened immediately. "The one who dismissed your capabilities for so many years. What possible reason would he have to come to Singapore?" "Revenge, most likely. He's been struggling with the reality of our divorce and my subsequent success." Ms. Wong's response was immediate and decisive. "You will stay here tonight. My security team is former Gurkha, and the guest suite is always prepared. Tomorrow, we will assess the situation." With clear heads. Her tone brooked no argument, and truthfully, I had no desire to return to an empty house that may have been targeted by Michael. "Thank you. I accept your kind offer." She nodded once, then pressed a button to summon her household manager. After giving instructions regarding the guest suite, she turned back to me. "Now, tell me everything. No abbreviated version. If this man is threatening you in my country, I need to understand the full picture." Over the next hour, I detailed the entire situation. Michael's initial dismissal of my worth, his subsequent obsession with undermining my business once he discovered its true value, and the escalating attempts to damage my reputation, culminating in the fabricated lawsuit evidence. And now, potentially, this physical intrusion. Ms. Wong listened intently, asking occasional clarifying questions, but mostly absorbing the information with the same analytical focus she brought to business decisions. "Men like your ex-husband are dangerously predictable," she said when I had finished. "Their entire identity is built around a perception of superiority. When that foundation crumbles, they become destructive, first to themselves, then to others." I never wanted this continuing conflict, I admitted. The divorce should have been the end of it. "But it couldn't be," Ms. Wong replied, her voice gentle but firm. "Because the divorce wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the collapse of his understanding of himself in relation to you. Every success you achieve is, in his distorted view, a personal attack. Her assessment echoed my own thoughts about Michael's behavior, but hearing it articulated so clearly brought a new clarity to the situation. "What would you suggest?" I asked, valuing her wisdom in this matter as I did in financial matters. "Confront the threat directly and decisively, not with anger or vengeance, but with the same strategic thinking you bring to your business decisions." She smiled slightly. "And leverage your network. You are not without resources or allies, Amanda." Later that evening, settled in Ms. Wong's impeccably appointed guest suite, I received an update from Grace. The immigration records confirmed that Michael Donovan had indeed entered Singapore 2 days earlier on a tourist visa. The police were now actively searching for him, having matched the security footage with his passport photo with 89% certainty. I slept fitfully despite the comfortable surroundings, my mind racing with possible scenarios for how this confrontation might unfold. By morning, I had made several decisions about how to proceed. First, I would not hide or alter my routine significantly. Singapore was my home now, and I refused to be driven into seclusion by Michael's desperate attempts at intimidation. Second, I would accept the enhanced security that Ms. Wong had already arranged, a discreet but highly trained protection specialist who would shadow me during this uncertain period. Third, I would meet with the police and provide a comprehensive statement about Michael's threats and behavior, ensuring that any encounter with him would happen on my terms rather than his. As I dressed in a borrowed outfit from Ms. Wong's extensive collection, we were fortunately similar in size, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Amanda Chen," I answered cautiously. "Ms. Chen, this is Inspector Tan from the Singapore Police Force. We have Michael Donovan in custody. He was apprehended attempting to enter the Marina Bay Financial Center where your office is located." Relief washed over me. "Was anyone harmed?" "No, ma'am. He was unarmed and offered no resistance when confronted by security. He's being held on charges of attempted trespassing and potential stalking offenses. Given the international nature of the situation, we would appreciate your coming to the station to provide a statement." "Of course. I can be there within the hour." As Ms. Wong's driver took me to the police station, I reflected on the bizarre turn of events. Michael, once so dismissive of my capabilities and worth, had flown halfway around the world in a desperate attempt to... what? Confront me? Intimidate me? The police hadn't mentioned any weapons, so perhaps his intentions weren't physically violent, but his behavior had clearly crossed the line from bitter ex-spouse to potential threat. At the station, Inspector Tan, a methodical, professional woman in her 40s, led me through the process of providing a formal statement about Michael's escalating pattern of behavior since our divorce. "We've contacted the American Embassy as required for foreign nationals in custody," she explained. "Mr. Donovan has requested consular assistance, but has declined legal representation thus far." "Has he explained why he came to Singapore?" I asked. Inspector Tan consulted her notes. "He claims he wanted to clear the air with you personally after being terminated from his law firm. He denies any intention to trespass or threaten, despite the security footage from your residence." "And what happens now?" "That depends partly on you, Ms. Chen. You have grounds to pursue stalking charges based on his pattern of behavior and the evidence of attempted entry at your home. The immigration authorities are also considering visa violation charges as he clearly misrepresented the purpose of his visit when entering Singapore." I considered my options carefully. Part of me wanted to press for the maximum charges, to ensure Michael faced serious consequences for his actions, and perhaps finally understood that his obsession with me needed to end. But another part recognized that continuing legal battles would only prolong our unhealthy connection. "Would it be possible for me to speak with him?" I asked, surprising myself somewhat with the request. Inspector Tan raised an eyebrow. "That's unusual in these circumstances, but not prohibited if both parties consent. May I ask why?" I believe this situation has escalated partly because we've been communicating through lawyers and assumptions rather than directly. Perhaps it's time to change that approach. After some consideration and consultations with her superiors, Inspector Tan arranged for me to speak with Michael in an interview room, with officers monitoring just outside. When Michael was brought in, I was struck by how different he looked from the confident, polished attorney I had married. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, his eyes hollow with exhaustion and something else, perhaps the first genuine recognition of how far he had fallen. "Amanda," he said as he took the seat across from me, his voice hoarse. "I didn't expect you to come. I didn't expect you to fly to Singapore and attempt to break into my home," I replied evenly. "Yet here we are." He flinched slightly. "I wasn't breaking in. I just wanted to talk to you, away from the lawyers and the corporate settings. By bypassing security systems and surveillance cameras, that's not how people arrange conversations, Michael." He ran a hand through his unkempt hair. "Everything got so twisted. One minute I was a respected partner at a top firm, married to a woman I thought I understood. The next, my whole life, was unraveling. And you were this financial powerhouse I never knew existed. I was always the same person. You just never bothered to see me clearly." Michael stared at the table between us. "Preston and Hughes fired me. Did you know that?" "Yes. They're working with you now, the firm I helped build for 12 years. I kept my voice neutral. They made a business decision based on their strategic needs in Asia, just as they made a decision to terminate your partnership based on ethical concerns about your behavior." "Is that what Linda told you?" he asked bitterly. "That it was about ethics?" "It was about money, Amanda. Your connections are more valuable to them than mine now." "Perhaps that's true," I acknowledged. "But you created this situation, Michael. Every step of the way, from dismissing my career during our marriage to fabricating evidence for a fraudulent lawsuit after our divorce. These were your choices." He looked up then, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "What happens now? Are you pressing charges?" I studied him for a long moment, seeing beyond the anger to the fear and confusion beneath. Michael had defined himself through external validation for so long. His prestigious firm, his carefully curated image, his role as the successful husband whose wife was merely decorative. When those pillars crumbled, he had nothing left to stand on. "That depends on you," I said finally. "I have no interest in an ongoing legal battle or continuing this cycle of retaliation. What I want is for this to end, completely and permanently." "How?" The question sounded genuinely desperate. "You return to Boston and rebuild your life separately from mine. No contact, no investigations into my business, no attempts to undermine what I've built. You focus on your future instead of obsessing over my present." He laughed hollowly. "What future? My reputation is ruined. My career is over. My finances are depleted from fighting a divorce battle I clearly couldn't win. Those are problems you created, and only you can solve them," I replied, not unkindly, but firmly. "But they won't be solved by continuing this vendetta against me." Michael was silent for several minutes, seemingly processing the reality of his situation. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, less defensive. "I really thought you needed me. All those years, I genuinely believed I was the successful one, the provider. Finding out that you had built this whole separate financial life, it felt like everything I thought I knew was a lie." "Not a lie," I corrected. "Just a narrative you created that was comfortable for you. I tried to show you who I really was, Michael. You weren't interested." He nodded slowly, a gesture that seemed to acknowledge a truth he was only now beginning to accept. "So what now? Singapore has strict laws. I'm facing potential criminal charges in a foreign country. If you agree to return to Boston immediately and cease all attempts to contact me or interfere with my business, I won't pursue stalking charges. I'll inform the police that I don't believe you intended physical harm." Relief flashed across his face, quickly replaced by suspicion. "Why would you do that? After everything?" I stood, gathering my purse as I prepared to leave. "Because continuing this conflict serves neither of us. And because seeing you here, like this, it only confirms what I've known for some time, which is that calling me worthless was the most valuable thing you ever did for me. It finally freed me to build a life without compromise." I left Michael sitting in that interview room, his head bowed in what might have been shame, or simply exhaustion. Inspector Tan was waiting outside, and I confirmed that I would not pursue stalking charges provided Michael left Singapore within 24 hours and agreed to a formal restraining order prohibiting any future contact. As Ms. Wong's driver took me back to my office, I felt a sense of closure that legal documents and geographical distance hadn't provided. Seeing Michael stripped of his arrogance and power, confronting the consequences of his choices in such a direct way, it marked the true end of the dynamic that had defined our relationship. That evening, I hosted a small dinner at my Sentosa Cove home for Ms. Wong and 2 potential clients from Malaysia. As we enjoyed cocktails on the terrace overlooking the sea, my phone buzzed with a notification from the Singapore police. Michael Donovan had boarded a flight to Boston, escorted by immigration officials who would ensure his departure. Ms. Wong noticed my brief smile as I read the message. "Good news?" she inquired discreetly. "The best kind," I replied, "a chapter truly ending." She raised her glass in a subtle toast. "Then let us focus on what comes next. I understand you're considering opening a Kuala Lumpur office to complement Singapore. As we discussed expansion plans and growth strategies, I felt a lightness that had been missing even during the months since my divorce was finalized. Michael had finally confronted the reality that I was never worthless. I had simply chosen to invest my worth in places he couldn't control or diminish. Later that night, after my guests had departed, I walked along the private beach adjoining my property, watching the lights of ships moving slowly through the Singapore Strait. The warm breeze carried the scent of frangipani from my garden, a reminder of how far I had come from the Boston penthouse where I had received that fateful text message. Michael had called me worthless, believing it would devastate me. Instead, it had liberated me, to claim my full value, to build a life and business on my own terms, to establish myself in a place where my expertise was recognized without qualification or diminishment. As I turned back toward my home, I made a mental note to call my financial team in the morning. It was time to establish the Amanda Chen Foundation, focused on supporting women entrepreneurs in emerging Asian economies. The offshore accounts that had so confounded Michael would now fund opportunities for women whose worth, like mine, might be underestimated by those closest to them. The greatest revenge, after all, wasn't in Michael's downfall. It was in the ripple effect of success that would extend far beyond anything he could have imagined when he dismissed me with a single thoughtless word. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.